Once had somebody say to me, I think I had given them some good news in my life, or maybe I was trying to help them out with something in theirs, and they said, man, it just seems like everything always works out for you. I was taken a little bit aback by this because when I look back on my life, I see a whole bunch of things that didn't just work out. For instance, I spent 4 years of my life, a whole lot of heartache, and a small fortune to get a master's degree in architecture. It's not paying off for me right now. I even have a friend who teaches personal finance who uses me as a cautionary tale, a case study for his class of what not to do. You can't just assume things are going to work out. These are events in my life that have made it so I didn't really have a choice but to leave the comfort of a current situation and strive forward into something unknown. And that is one part of the gospel story from today that I think we often overlook. Jesus does not ask his disciples to go on ahead of him. He doesn't suggest that they leave. Our story tells us that he made them. And the Greek word is even more firm. It's that Jesus compelled them to get into the boat, forced them even, knowing that the journey ahead was perilous, knowing that their boat was going to be battered, that the winds would be against them. And again, even this part is a little sanitized because the Greek could read that the boat was tormented. The same Greek word that the gospel uses for people that are afflicted with a demon. And that the winds were not just against them, they were contrary to them. Hostile even. So what better metaphor is there for discipleship than being compelled into places where you'll feel tormented and as if everything around you is contrary? And that is not an accident. That's the assignment. As followers of Christ, we are forced into the world in rough waters, and there will always be forces that are directly opposed to us. So the question is, what happens to us out there? And where is God in all that torment? In the story today, the disciples are so consumed with fear that they don't even recognize their teacher, their friend, the person that they have been traveling around with for days and days, the person who they just witnessed take 5 loaves and 2 fish and feed thousands of people. They were so ready to be afraid that they think he's a ghost when they see him walking towards them. And it wasn't the winds or the storm that blinded them, it was their fear. But Peter, bless his heart, so ready to believe, momentarily finds the courage to ask Jesus to call him out of the boat. And the story seems to be going well. We're told that he's walking on the water towards Jesus. He doesn't sink right away. Now, the winds were there the whole time. The sea is raging the whole time, but Peter is doing it. But it's not until his focus turns away from his mission, the reason why he's walking, and on to the fear around him, on to the contrary forces, that he starts to sink. And it's not as if Peter fails a test. Peter gets a bad rap here. So many people want to talk about Peter if he would have just stayed focused on Jesus. He's the only disciple that gets out of the boat, so he's the closest one out of all of them to getting the point. But fear does that to us all. Fear causes us to forget what we're actually here to be doing. Because we get focused on all of the things that could go wrong, all of the people around us that want to tell us we're doing it wrong, all of the forces opposing us, all of the problems that seem unsolvable or insurmountable until those things, the wind, is the only thing we can see. The waves and the wind don't sink Peter. Fear does. And that's okay too. Fear is our natural response to forces in the world that make it difficult to be the best versions of ourselves. And whether you're Peter or the great prophet Elijah from the first lesson today, fear does not keep God from reaching out to us. Today, Elijah is hiding in a cave. He has just done everything God has asked him to do, yet all the forces around him are still against him. Right before the story, he is so tormented that he's in this cave and he just gives up. He says, God, just please let me die. He's done. But God shows up anyway, just not as Elijah was expecting, because Elijah might have wanted God to be there in the wind or the earthquake or the fire, all of these forces that could have shown the people the God that he was dealing with. Maybe even a little smiting in there if you're lucky. But God shows up not in the spectacle, but in the sheer silence that follows. Same with the gospel. The disciples could not see Jesus in the storm, could not see Jesus in the miracle of walking on water. Instead, it is when he climbs into the boat and everything goes quiet that they worship him for who he is, truly the Son of God. And it's not like God's presence was only then and there. God's presence was never in question. Not for Elijah in his despair, not for the disciples in their terror, not for Peter as he began to sink. God was always there. Jesus is already here. We just so often look for him in the storm, in the loud, maybe even in the triumph, in the things that work out. Missing that presence that's beside us in the calm and quiet moments all the time. And that is why the story says that Jesus' hand catches Peter immediately. Because it's not about whether Peter should have believed harder or done better. Remember, he is the only disciple that gets out of that boat. And the fact that he doesn't succeed in his water walk doesn't matter because Jesus catches him anyway. Sure, Jesus calls him, "O you of little faith." But let's not forget, in this same gospel, Jesus tells us that just a little faith is all you need, that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. So maybe Peter's little faith is all that is needed there. Peter was never beyond Jesus' reach. And keeping his eyes fixed on Jesus the whole time would not have made him more worthy. The courage to step out of the boat in the first place is the act that helps him recognize Jesus. Lord, save me. It's kind of like being told that everything works out for me. When the truth is, when I look back, it kind of feels like most things didn't. I didn't make it in architecture. I left. I know, spoiler alert, right? Then I became a full-time soccer coach chasing a dream that I had had since I was a kid. That ended too. My family and I at one point made the decision to move to California thinking this would be a longer-term thing. And when we got there, the seminary announced that they were closing to in-person classes. In fact, if you look at every step I've taken in my career, just for what the step is and the fruit that it produces in the moment, you might think every single one of them didn't really work out, at least not how I was expecting. It's why I make such a good cautionary tale for a bunch of high schoolers trying to decide what they want to do in college. But yet I am certainly happier right now today with all of you than I have ever been. But not because I displayed some great sense of faith in God's call, not because I kept my eyes focused on God the whole time, not because I didn't sink, not because the leaps that I took paid off, because if you look at them, they really didn't. I am here because when I failed over and over, not a single time did I fail alone. As followers of Christ, we are always going to be compelled into contrary waters. We're always going to be tormented by what we find there, whether it's in our families or our homes, in our jobs, in the world, in the news. It's all going to be hard. And we are always going to have moments when we are so afraid of what we're seeing that we look around and we're not sure God's there. We can't see God. But we can keep taking that chance anyway. We can keep stepping out of that boat over and over, fixing our eyes toward where we think the one calling us is, rather than the storm around us. But not so we don't sink. There is no magical formula that keeps that from happening. But so when we do sink, the hand to catch us is already there, as it always has been. We'll continue to find God in the going, in the trying, and in the quiet moments in between the calm of the storms or the joy of the successes. And we'll know, because looking around us, look at all of the love here, we'll know that every time we fail, we're never failing alone. Amen.